Sometimes a movement happens. And through that movement, a new perspective is born. But sometimes, that perspective becomes confused. And now? Humans are known to argue over the historical accuracy of everything. Hip-hop's beginnings are no different. And through that collective retrospective view, hip-hop's culture has always been the subject of struggle and oppression. And we know that the ones who have gained notoriety through time are the ones who typically write history. This is where hip-hop is different. Hip-hop culture is the self-written story of every individual cast out from society. The ones who pushed against the curtain of complacency in a society who wouldn't stand up for the underdog. A place that was created through an understanding of social deterioration. Even more so, it was a message to those who still believe that any man or woman deserves more than the next purely based off of one's own inherited privileges. Now, this opinion may be argued, but if we look back far enough, hip-hop culture has been around for far longer than some people may care to admit. The oppression of minorities is a large factor. We won't go into centuries-old urban sociology, but one may also argue that hip-hop's culture movement energy could be traced back before even slavery in America. Perhaps a video for another day.
The guy who created a culture called hip-hop, but only Cool Herc. No Bambada, no Flash. I'm not a copycat.
The industrialization of America brought with it much more responsibility, and many more people to consider when formulating large populations of humans. We will start our story today in the 1960s, a time of huge technological advances, a time of free thought and large culture shifts. We look specifically to the Bronx in New York. Rebuilding communities, religions changing their hierarchies, millions of people relocating inward. This decade harbors one of the first logged observable moments of true gentrification. For those of you who don't know what that means, gentrification is the process of updating a part of town in a way that brings in more value to a community. Through this process, it is also shown that property values and prices of normal resources go up. During this time, there was a lot of updating done to the large cities in New York and communities like the Bronx. Many times the part of the communities that were being updated drove out minorities and individuals who could not afford to live there anymore, forcing them to move to places with less resources and likely less opportunities. Gentrification is a process that is still highly debated today because the relocation of minorities is still going on. Along with passive relocation and resource stealing tactics carried out by those in power, in the 1960s, there was still very direct racism going on. And not just between Europeans and those of color, there was hate aimed towards those who just grew up in a different part of the city from you. Survival of the fittest within the concrete jungle. Years of oppression and lack of resources eventually forced groups of individuals to treat the city as a jungle, claiming parts of town and striking those down who disrespected the rules of your street. Solidarity and brotherhood found through fighting a common enemy. Anyone else who wasn't with you. There are records now that show many people were extremely uncomfortable with these living situations, and they knew that the people they were fighting were not the people who could change their circumstances. Just misplaced anger and discomfort thrown in any direction that drew attention. Gang violence, crime of all brands, and an overwhelmed police force. Eventually something within society would have to break and make way for a change. Enter hip-hop. Sometimes mistaken for only a music scene, it was much more than that. It was an entirely new culture being developed. In the beginning, this culture was mainly comprised of those from African American and Puerto Rican descent. And with this new culture came new art, new literature, new social norms, new friends, and new enemies. In pop culture, there were three large entities that ushered in this new era. DjKool Herc, Zulu Nation, and Grandmaster Flash are some of the most well-recognized names within this world. Through music, dance, and social gatherings, these groups brought their communities together. They took a stand against social injustice and fighting. The documentary Rebel Kings is an awesome depiction of how these hip-hop legends accomplished so much. This initial push was extremely important for the future of hip-hop culture because these first big movers were actually investing something into the communities. They were instilling a sense of pride and shelter where their government seemed to fail them. The greats of hip-hop aren't only remembered for the art they created, but the positive changes they directly made within their society. As time moved on, hip-hop spread. Again, not only for the artistic ideas it brought along, but the loud war cry of social injustice and unity. Predominantly found in large cities, the stories seem to be true across the country and eventually across the entire world. A struggling family working too hard just to get by, resources dwindling, crime, and a lack of interest in wanting to understand those outside the majority. Hip-hop was a natural scene to find those who also saw discrepancies in our world. Hip-hop was a platform for individuals to know that they were not alone in their potentially dark situations. Moving into the 1980s and 1990s, we can see that hip-hop has traveled across our entire country, and just in time for a revolution. Eazy-E, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, and eventually Eminem, the collection of NWA and the projects that would be inspired from the social movement, shook the world. What used to be an afterthought in the 1970s, this group directly said, "Fuck the police coming straight from the underground." And at the time, society had mixed feelings, but they loved it. Most individuals knew that racial profiling and police brutality were a huge issue. Only now, someone finally called the culprits out. This hip-hop era is clouded in extreme gang violence, police brutality, poverty, and uncertainty. Only now the scenery is different. We're located in California for this uprising. This era was extremely important for the growth of hip-hop because many of these artists and revolutionaries are still living to this day, still making changes and still fighting for people's rights. Although there was much accomplished over the years, when it came down to understanding what was going through the minds of these culture creators, we don't have much to look further than how old they were. Many successful hip-hop revolutionaries were just teenagers. I suppose I shouldn't say just. Many teenagers are already angsty and have this feeling of social injustice in their heart until they are able to find a place in the world. But what happens when you actively suppress entire populations of individuals, beat them down, take away resources, and claim that it's their fault for not trying hard enough? On top of being a teenager. Well, the year is 2021, global crisis, social unrest, police brutality, racial revolutions, COVID, and a whole new perspective. Hip-hop and art culture is undergoing a huge upgrade. Things aren't how they were in the 1990s. We're stronger, smarter, more united than we've ever been. But like any civilization, we can't all agree on everything. There are still huge populations of people living around the entire world without adequate resources. Many people work too long and get paid too little, but something has changed. The stigma that is surrounding so many social issues encapsulated within hip-hop have come to light, and we are in an age where we have enough social warriors to actually have conversations about the issues being experienced. But with every issue resolved, another one emerges. Modern hip-hop is very broad. We see talk of social injustice and philosophy from greats like A$AP Rock and Kendrick Lamar. We see female and Mexican rights from Snow the Product. But what I want to talk about today is mental health in hip-hop. The mental stigma revolving around hip-hop is a dark and gloomy cloud. Many artists and revolutionaries aren't extremely focused on social movements involving the gathering of many people right now. They're worried about the issues inside each of our heads at any given moment. The enemy has become our own minds. In our modern age, we are at a point of introspection that has become far too painful for many people and artists to continue on in this world. Modern rappers such as Atmosphere, Immortal Technique, Lil Peep, Juice WRLD, and even Mac Miller have all talked about these issues. And many of the very people who have brought to light these issues have also died from the very thing they talk about. Although many other revolutions are going on, I foresee a new revolution. This time it's not a battle between other individuals, it's focusing on the importance of the battle within ourselves. Something we can't actually fight outwardly, but we also can't ignore. I foresee an age where through hip-hop and other art culture we are able to teach communities of moderation and communication. Cultures blending together in order to understand ourselves further, in order to warn future generations of the horrors from the past. If I could encapsulate where I think hip-hop is heading, the short answer is I literally have no idea. There is just such a crazy influx of new artists right now that I couldn't possibly make a guess what will become of pop culture. I can, however, give you a song that I think encapsulates a good guess on where we are headed. This is a song called Good News from Mac Miller's posthumous album Circles. Someone once said that this video looks like the ending credits to Mac's life, and damn, I couldn't agree more. Such a beautiful and somber song. Hey everyone, I just wanted to say if you liked the video, consider leaving a comment to let me know. If you want to debate anything I said, feel free to check out the resources I used to make this video. You can find all the links to them in the description below. And as always, happy researching and thanks for watching.
Spent the whole day in my head. Do a little spring cleaning. I'm always too busy dreaming. Well, maybe I should wake up instead. A lot of things I regret, but I just say I forget.